How strong are the boundaries between society's different social classes? Is there any way to the top from the bottom that's both realistic and legal? Or is there none at all? I'm Angus Stewart, and you're listening to episode 17 of the Translated Chinese Fiction podcast. As you might guess from that little intro hook, our story for this episode is Hao Jingfang's Folding Beijing. If you have no idea what I'm on about, you're in for a treat, especially because the guest of this episode is Lyu Guangzhao, and you'll learn more about him when I get to the interview part of the show. But before that, we have some listener feedback, excitingly. So I woke up yesterday morning and found I had a message on Facebook from someone who I hadn't added before, and was really thrilled to see it was from Jeffrey Kinkley, who is a retired professor and academic of, I guess, Chinese studies, Chinese fiction, especially Chinese literature, and he's also done quite a bit of translation work. He's what you might call an old hand, an old China hand. He was a guy who I guess spoke to a little bit and encountered at the Leeds Symposium that I've mentioned previously on the show. And without rambling too much, Jeffrey had been listening to the back catalogue, I suppose, of episodes and had a wee bit of feedback on the Dingling episode. So I was wondering who Tani Barlow was. I wasn't sure, first of all, if that's a male or a female name. Well, Tani Barlow is indeed a woman, and in fact, she's a high-profile feminist. So thank you, Jeffrey, for that info. And there was also the translator's name, Gary Bjorge. I wasn't sure how to say his last name. Bjorge, B-J-O-R-G-E. But yeah, it's Bjorge. So small things, but incredibly useful to have these questions I asked long ago answered by enthusiastic listeners. That is what makes me happy. That's one of the things I do this all for. So yeah, thank you. Before we start with the interview, just the plugs first and foremost. This is a very special episode. This is the first of the Terrific Translated Chinese Fiction podcast Sci-fi series. We're going to be doing episodes on some very exciting stories. We've got a Han Song short story. There'll be Waist Tide by Chen Qiufan, and there will be discussion of Xia Jia's upcoming collection of short stories, A Summer Beyond Your Reach, published by Clark's World. And I'm not going to reveal who all the guests are that I've got lined up, but expect the best. Don't expect Han Song, but do expect the best. There's a clue. Yeah. The other plugs, of course, if you want to support the show, there's two places you can do that. There's Buy Me a Coffee /Terrific, and that's linked to in the show notes. There you can give a one-off contribution. And for bonus content, you can give a monthly contribution on Patreon, patreon.com/Terrific. Basically, I'm trying to cover the £100 hosting fee for SoundCloud per year. And those are the two places where you can help me out with that. Of course, the best way to support the show is not financial, it's social. Just tell people about it. There'll be a funny joke at the end of the show where I tell you to tell your dog. That's a tradition. But yeah, I've rambled for a good 4 minutes or so now, or almost 4 minutes. It'll be less after editing. So let's stop the rambling and let's get to the interview with our awesome guest, Lyu Guangzhao. So I'm on the show with Lyu Guangzhao, or on the line with him. Now, he's the leader/member of the Chinese Sci-fi Club down in London, aka, and sorry if I mess this one up, 科幻研究在伦敦, and he's also a PhD student at UCL, University College London. He's doing a thesis that compares the British New Wave, although asterisk on that, of science fiction, with the present and perhaps contentious new wave of Chinese sci-fi, because some people say there is a new wave. Others, notably Ken Leo, are a bit skeptical about that. But anyway, Guangzhao is essentially an incredibly cool guy, and I think he's a really brilliant guest to kick off the sci-fi season we're doing on this podcast. There's going to be several more episodes with several more exciting guests. More about that at the end of the show. Anyway, how's it going, Guangzhao? Are you okay over there?
Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you, Angus, very much for inviting me for this kind of podcast. Actually, I was peeping at your previous podcast with the other cool people as well. They are cool as well, and yeah, I'm really flattered to find my name among you or whomever you can invite for the sci-fi field. I don't know whom you have invited, but it feels like there's a picture. And there are lots of the big names in that picture, and one
Yes.
and me. So actually, I'm not feeling that I'm qualified to be with him, but also very much thank you for having me.
You're really welcome.
First podcast. Yeah, I'm doing well. So I'm from University College London, UCL, comparative literature, and I'm currently actually not doing the British New Wave as in the 70s, because the British New Wave is a special term to describe people like J.G. Ballard or someone like Moorcock, or basically in the late 60s and 70s. But my focus is basically about, there's another term called British sci-fi boom, which can date back basically to the beginning of the 1990s. So we have some like representative figures like China Miéville, like Ian Banks, Stephen Baxter, or sometimes John Harrison can be one of them, and some other stories. Yeah, in that kind of case. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now about the 90s basically. And for the Chinese part, yes, we call it the Chinese New Wave, also from the 1990s. But Ken Liu is not the one who proposed it, I think. So
no, I think he's skeptical of the term.
Yeah, skeptical. Yeah, we got this someone from, it's a very important scholar for Chinese science fiction studies, based at Wesley College in Boston.
I know, it's Song Ming Wei, isn't it?
Song Ming Wei, Professor Song Ming Wei. Yeah, he's quite influential right now, and we have a special nickname for him as well. He was called the godfather of Chinese science overseas. So yeah, that name was, I think, given by Professor Wang Dewey at Harvard. So yeah.
Right. So that makes 3 nicknames now, doesn't it? Because he's Godfather, Ken Liu is Buddha, and Neil Clark of Clark's World is Angel. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got a holy trinity.
You got Trinity. Yeah, people like Trinity here in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So how did we meet? Can you tell us a wee bit of that story?
How do we meet?
Yeah, you and I.
Just at the Leeds Symposium back in the last month, October. Yeah, I was invited by and you as well, by I think Sarah and Francis from Leeds University.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot the exact name of the center, but basically it's kind of the Leeds Center for New Chinese Writing, I guess.
That's the one. Yep.
That's the one. Great. So they were having kind of a symposium, inviting also some very famous people like Xia Jia, like Chen Qiufan for Chinese science fiction. They are the writers, and also for some translators like Nikki Harman, like Michel Dieter, and also some even more exact names like Professor Kenkley, right?
Yep, he was there.
Yeah, he was there. It was fantastic, and you and me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I imagine you like in the coffee bar.
Yeah, you were the very first person. I was quite early and was really nervous about all these superstars. A lot of them, not just, superstars in the world of publishing, but also they're people I had been writing about in my dissertation. A lot of them, anyway. First person in the door was yourself, and you're incredibly friendly. You made me laugh, so that definitely helped get you on the show.
No, you're the same. You're the first person I met also. Just like after very early train from London Euston, which was even delayed, and to Leeds is a very early train, and I got some coffee on the train and some coffee with you, but I still feel really tired on that symposium. But
I was quite fresh. I'd stayed the night in Leeds overnight. But you did a pretty good write-up of the symposium in Chinese on the Chinese Sci-Fi Club's WeChat account.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to tell us a wee bit about that WeChat account?
Oh yeah. That WeChat account is basically what I did in London. My friend and I are running a kind of Chinese science fiction reading group monthly in London. So that WeChat account is basically is serving for the purpose of like promoting the information, writing some reports of the reading group we in which we will talk about several Chinese short stories and novels as well, but also writing some reports in terms of the conferences and symposium. Basically, I attended like this one at Leeds, and also I've written the conferences at Oxford, Lancaster, also here in London, Birkbeck as well. So that's basically technically it should be for the reading group. So it's like an official account, but currently I am the one who's running it. And my friend Angela, you didn't meet her at Leeds. She wasn't there. She was the one of the co-organizers with me as well, and she's been responsible for the Twitter and basically Twitter and the mailing list for the emails. So you can we are available with basically everywhere: Facebook, Twitter, and WeChat. Quite approachable, I think.
Awesome. I'll definitely take a chance to ask you a wee bit more about the group later on in the episode. I'm just going to plug, as well as your write-up, Nick Stember did a really good English language write-up of the symposium. And if you are not a reader, if you just want to digest everything by audio, on this podcast's Patreon account, I rambled for about an hour going off my notes, recalling everything I could. So there's that there as well. Now, Guangzhao, is there anything I haven't mentioned about you or your work before we charge into discussing the text, the story for this episode?
Well, I think you have done an excellent research for me. I don't think so. We can continue.
Well, thank you for the compliment, and let's proceed. So our story is Folding Beijing, or its original title, Beijing折叠, and the author is Hao Jingfang. This is a pretty awesome story, and Guangzhao, you didn't write it. Hao Jingfang wrote it. You didn't translate it. Ken Liu translated it. So although listeners might already be able to guess, what's your connection to this story?
My connection to this story? As you said, I didn't write it and I didn't translate it. I wish I did, but I can't. So actually, this story, the name of the story came to me it's not very early, because I the same with you actually. I got this name after it won the Hugo Award back in the 16th. But I didn't read it right after that. I read it like in this year when my friend Angela and I were trying to set up this kind of reading group in London, and that was in April. I can recall that was in April, and we were discussing which text we are going to use for the debut. And we just came out with a kind of idea that the debut novel shouldn't be too science fictional, and it has to get some special ideas on how can we expand, because we have to set the tone for our reading group. It isn't by the debut. We have to set our taste or interest in this way. So we think the science fiction is not only about science or science fiction, the so-called hardcore science fictions. It should have some
connection to our present reality.
Connections to what we have here and now in our present. So we just get this kind of Folding Beijing, which is perfectly match our theme and our thoughts in that case. So we just get this one for a debut. I read it and we discuss it, and I write a kind of a reading group report on the WeChat platform. So that's basically the connections to me with the story.
Right. Did anything really interesting come out of that discussion you had in the group?
We did, because that was basically the first one. So I wasn't very sure how to run the reading group. So we just get in the room and sit in a circle, and very friendly actually, and flexibly and friendly exchange some ideas like, have you finished reading this story? No, I haven't. But you don't have to. So I just got run through the story again, full of spoilers actually, and I just basically tell them what the structure about the story, how can we manage to proceed from this structure to get some deeper meanings hidden behind the surface, like the uneven structure, social structure, or this so-called social stratification, different classes, and how this kind of unevenness, how is it related to the neoliberal social discourse we are having right now, and what kind of role does capital plays in that, we mentioned a lot of things, but yeah, if you just, I can't recall right now, but I'm confident that I mentioned some of the very interesting ideas in the report I I wrote for this.
And just
you can read
to
Chinese.
check, oh sorry, what were you going to say?
I wish you can read in Chinese.
I cannot, but any really determined listeners who can't read Chinese, I'm sure you could find the article and maybe run it through a translator. But if you can read Chinese, then that account, Sci-fi in China, is an absolute treasure trove. Do you also have an academic connection to this story in your own thesis?
Yeah, I am doing that. I have just submitted my upgrade report to my supervisor 2 weeks ago, which is not about story, which is about China medieval and Chen Qiufan's with tide. But I'm moving to the second one. The second one will be a comparative study between the folding Beijing and another one from the British side. It's called Raft. Written by Stephen Baxter. But I have, because I'm still working on it, I have to still being worried about my upgrade report right now because my supervisor told me he's gonna take a strike, and so my upgrade could be delayed, or like change the time. I don't know, but right now, but for the next stage, I'm definitely writing about the folding Beijing, and I'm still looking for any possible perspective that can take to engage in the both stories, because I have to find a kind of equivalence between the two stories, maybe from techno-capitalism or unevenness, things like that. But I haven't decided yet.
Okay, well, here's the perfect place to crystallize your ideas, I suppose.
Yeah, I believe so.
I'll do my best to challenge you. So I'll try and quiz you on your academic angle on the story a little later on, but let's look at the actual story itself. So spoilers allowed, because I don't think the plot is the main appeal of the story. I think the setting is the main appeal, so I'm okay with spoiling the kind of where the story goes. So with that in mind, what would you say is the elevator pitch for Folding Beijing, or what's the basic premise?
Yeah, you're okay about the spoilers because you have finished that, right?
Yeah, I'm selfish.
Yeah, we're both, so we don't care about the spoilers. Okay, that's fantastic.
And any listener who's not read the story, I'm judging them. So
okay, yeah. For the elevator pitch, I would say the title itself is a perfect elevator pitch for that story. In Beijing, if you got one of the city can be folded into different spaces, that means you got boundaries for the different spaces. You got exclusion in that case. The people excluded or separated into three spaces, and basically according to their ability or capability in engaging this capitalist or neoliberal social discourse I think it's a near future perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. So to clarify that for anyone who's not encountered the story before, it's a folding version of Beijing, which portions society into 3 classes. Now, it gives you exact numbers for how many people are in each class. I did not make a note of them, but essentially, I think about half the city is the working class, the bottom class, and then maybe about a third or a quarter are the middle kind of white collar class, and then a small portion are your kind of upper ruling class. And it's not just space that's divided, time's divided as well.
I would say they are calculated by 2 days. And the upper class, which is in the first space, they can enjoy like 24 hours.
24 hours. Again, I was dumb and didn't make notes, but that sounds about right.
But basically, I forgot the exact time they can share. But basically, the upper class, the first space can enjoy the time.
Yeah, they get natural light as well.
They can go 12 hours, I think, and the second space go 8 or so, but no, 24, 12 and 8. Yeah, basically like that. Basically like that.
In
Like
any case,
you got,
the upper class have the best deal.
yeah, you got what I mean by the first space can enjoy the most of the time, while the bottom space can just get can barely got enough time for their living. Actually, they just struggling from the limited time budget and trying to get things done as soon as possible, and they are also limited into a very small space. Each person can get a very small room, and they have to be hide or stay in the room when the folding stuff take place, and they have to endure this kind of change of the city, and they have to sacrifice their space and time to whatever beyond the upper classes, the middle classes, things like that. So the space and time are both folded in this story. But forget about the time. I forgot the time. Sorry.
Yeah, same. It's my fault. It's my job to make notes, and I did not note these specific things. But I think it's an interesting point that Hao Jingfang, the author, she gives you the numbers that divides the time and also the population. It's all quite neatly laid out in that way, and I think it's to the benefit of the story, not the detriment. What you were saying, so I noticed you've said neoliberalism and capitalism quite a few times since we started talking, and that made me something occur to me that didn't quite come to the forefront of my mind when I was reading the story or rereading it recently. It's just how much of it is about work. Every single character, as far as I recall, has a job. Even the upper class characters, I don't think we meet anyone who's not working. We meet one upper class character who doesn't have to work but chooses to anyway. Yeah. And then contrast that with your lower class characters who are all, like you said, they work and then they get forcefully put to sleep by the sleeping gas, and that's their life. But yeah, it's totally a story with an economic angle.
Yeah, that's true, because from this story, I would say only through working kind of person being engaged in the society, because you have to work, you get into this kind of economic activity in the society, and you can get some meanings in that society. That's your subjectivity. You have to keep working and keep being connected to this kind of capitalist or the privatized market and then the society. Otherwise, you will be marginalized from every perspective. You are marginalized from the society. You can't contribute to this kind of society because you are not working. You cannot making or create value to the society. Actually, that's another very important or interesting thing I would like to touch on.
Go for it.
Yeah, because we know that the so-called pillar industry in the third space is kind of a waste recycling, right? But I think at around or near the end of the story, when the main character travel to the upper space, and he noticed that this kind of a waste recycling industry can be easily replaced by machines, by robots, that actually no one need to do it, but the so-called upper class people choose not to do it because they have to keep something for this kind of a bottom class to be engaged in, and they have to give some work to them. Although this kind of work cannot make any additional value to the society, they are absolutely in vain, and they are absolutely insignificant. But so that's the very interesting point in this case, because in this story the bottom class is totally excluded from this kind of social activity. They can't get connected to social to the upper two classes, and what they can do is just limited to whatever they have in the third space, and suffering from the limited space. But they can't. I can't see any fluid movement, especially from the third to the upper two classes spaces. So that's very very interesting to me, at least, because this is the first time I noticed that someone are totally excluded from the society, and in this case, they are more than half the population of the whole city.
Yeah, I know we meet one character, Lao Ge, who is from the third space. So third space being the bottom tier or the bottom fold, and he managed to climb up through the army, but even found that he had to keep advancing. If I remember right, he had to leave the army because you needed family connections to get right to the top. So you're right that there. It's not at least in the story, we see one case of a way to get to the top, but it's not fluid. It's not necessarily fair, and it's the army. So in a way, it's outside of the actual normal economy. It's through the state that this guy gets to the top.
Yeah, only that one, I think, from the military. I think that's really exceptional because I can barely recall that he also talked about things like it can't be happening very often. This is only a special case, things like that. But yeah, because if you move up to the top or even in the middle class or the second space, that means you have the opportunity to be engaged or to be involved in the social activities, basically. Basically based on like economic activities or capital exchanges. But if you don't have that capital, if you don't have, even because I think someone at the top mentioned that although we have some inflation in the first two spaces, but that kind of inflation cannot travel down to the bottom because they are totally segregated. People won't feel that. People won't take part in our economic activities, so they don't feel this kind of they call it a kind of suffering is inflation.
It's funny, we started off the podcast talking about how we met through a symposium, and in the story there's talk of symposiums and internships as a way for people from the middle to meet the top. And sure enough, if I hadn't have had spare money and spare time to get myself down to Leeds, I wouldn't have met you and all the other superstars at the symposium. And one reason I'm able to do that is I've moved back in with my family. So I have savings, I'm not fighting to pay the rent. So it's really quite analogous to our real world, not just in China, but I think everywhere these days.
Yeah, actually, not just in China, because the very similar thing. If you just change the title of the story, folding Beijing, like you can say, the folding London,
of course,
or folding Paris. It works everywhere.
Do you know the working title of the film adaptation is Folding City?
The Folding City, which one?
They're going to, or at least there's a plan to make a film of Folding Beijing.
Oh, really?
But, and its working title is Folding City.
I don't even know Beijing. I don't even know that. So you sound like more expert in this case.
At least in the kind of business angle. This was a thing I touched on in my dissertation.
Oh, right. Okay.
I think there is another Hao Jingfang adaptation in the works, but I don't know. They were saying the same thing about Three Body Problem, so we may never see
it. But we will, just get some confidence in that.
Okay.
Sometime, maybe 20 years, you will see some movies like that. Yeah.
What you were saying about the automation, so the fact that all the waste disposal jobs could be replaced, it reminded me, is a feeling I had first time I read the story a year ago, and then rereading it. It's the best engagement with automate the problem of automation. So what massive numbers of people do when automatic processes replace their jobs. I think I've read some decent, news articles about it, but nothing that really captured my imagination. And I know some politicians in various parts of the world have thoughts about this stuff too. But this is probably the only engagement with automation and its economic questions that I've read. Maybe that's because I'm not reading the right stuff or the right sci-fi. But from that angle, I think that's one of the story's strongest points, are the quite considered thoughts about the future of mechanized modern economies?
Yeah, I think so. The automation, the machines, and the robots in the story, and also in other science fictions, is it's a very important theme right now for science fiction studies as well. The machines, and in one way, because you can talk about the artificial intelligence in that kind of case, robotics, and how the machines taking over the world. But another perspective, you can also talk about this kind of machinery, this kind of machine economy, and its relation to how we deal with the labor force, we have right now. Because if you just get so many like robots like in the industry, like they can do whatever you need to do. They are like invincible. They are iron. They are very strong. They can do whatever job that human beings can do. So that leaves a consequence there. Some people will lose their job. Some will lose the income source that they can't get the money for their families. They can't get enough money for food and accommodation. So that gives a way for us to think about this kind of labor relation or conflict between machines, automation machines, and human beings as well. But in this story, I would say because this choice, whether you choose machine or labor force, human labor force, is very importantly based on a calculation of cost and how much you can earn. If you notice, one of the ways, like you just introduce automation to your plant, to your company, and it will generate far more profit than it can get from the labor forces. So you will choose the automation as well. But definitely you will choose if you are the boss of the company. But if in the other case you will choose the humans. Yeah. So in that way, especially in many of the science fiction stories, there's kind of a very obvious conflict in this kind of how to make a choice, how to choose from these two options.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was very closely, because my PhD thesis is a very important part of it is about neoliberalism and is science fiction representation in China and the UK. So in that case, how do you make a choice is very deeply rooted in this kind of neoliberal discourse. And you can get enough money from one of the ways, you will choose that. But other ways, it seems like the capital is one of the most thing or element you will rely your decision on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just Googling. There's a journalist in the UK, and I've forgotten his name, and it's really bothering me. I might have to edit this. There's a writer. He writes a lot about these issues from a kind of critical of neoliberal angle. Is he called Matt something?
Called Matt?
Oh dear. I'm gonna have to look this up later.
It's okay.
Editor's note: it's Paul Mason. Paul Mason. I'll put his stuff in the show notes.
Yes. So rolling on, I've got in my notes here a little fact that 3 years ago, in 2016, Folding Beijing won the Hugo Award for Best Novelette. The Hugos being, as far as I'm aware, the premier international sci-fi book awards. Notably, Three Body Problem won I think the top Hugo Prize a few years before this. So do you think Folding Beijing is a deserving winner? I guess we probably think it is. But also, how do you think Folding Beijing got that prize?
Well, I think Folding Beijing got that prize is not. It is deserving. It is a very good novelette, especially welcomed from the English readers actually, and also thanks to I think the Kenliu's translation, right? Kenliu's translation was really helpful in this case. But that's the interesting stuff in China, because this story is not that successful in China.
Right.
Yeah, I read some comments for that story. Some people are criticizing basically the quality of the writing. They think the writing itself is not that good enough. But you know what? In the translation, this kind of stuff will be lost. You translate from Chinese to English or English to Chinese. The original, the writing quality or writing characteristics of the original writer will be inevitably sacrificed from maybe to different degrees, but things are different. Especially, that would be based on the translator himself, Ken Liu himself in this case. But from the perspective of the story itself, some people, like in China, some science fiction readers, they will say this story is a bit too soft from their perspective. Kind of hard, the so-called hard science fiction is very welcome. It's always welcome because we got in China we have 3 big names in the hardcore.
Yes.
And you got that. So
Wang Jingfang, Han Song, and Liu Cixin. Is that right?
No. It's the Chinese writers. I mean the American.
Oh, right.
I mean, and the Western 3 Western big names. Basically, it was Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, and also Highland. Yeah, they are the 3 that recommended that were recommended all the time. So. Right. That's another interesting issue, that the taste of the Chinese science fiction readers are basically influenced by the American traditions. Although we have Arthur C. Clarke in among the big 3 names, but Arthur C. Clarke, from the academic perspective, is also very inclined or very close to his American counterparts, to the American sci-fi tradition. So, because of the introduction and translation of Western science fiction stories into China, because of this kind of translation procedure, because of this influence of the British science fiction is not that famous in China right now.
Right.
So that gives part of the reason that why Chinese readers are very interested in the so-called traditional science fiction, which is only about space, and also you have some very solid inventions. We call it novel, science fictional inventions, novel in the story. We got something new, we got something scientific, and that makes it a science fiction. But in Folding Beijing, it's not that obvious. You got this kind of innovation, you got this kind of creation. The very essential part of the story is setting, and this setting is about space, how the space can be folded, and how the space represents different social classes, and how the space can lead to the social stratification. And that's basically the essence of the story. And that maybe right now, it is a bit controversial for some of the sci-fi readers to classify the story into science fiction.
Right. Yeah, I think we were saying earlier, it's quite a precise story when it comes to how time and space are divided up, the description of the economy is, I think, very sharp and based on real stuff. But the actual science, like for example, I don't know, the hinges of how the ground folds, that's not what Hao Jingfang dives into, and I think the story's better for that. But it's an interesting thing you've pointed out, which kind of leads on to the I think it was just Wikipedia research I did about this story's publication history. So according to Wikipedia, Beijing折叠, the original Chinese version, was first published 7 years ago in 2012 on Tsinghua University's bulletin board site, a BBS. News, I don't know how you say this, Newsmith, newsmth.net. And then 2 years later, it got into 2 Chinese magazines. 1 year after that, it got translated by Ken Liu, found its way into Uncanny magazine, where it's still up on their website. You can read it online for free. That's where I did my rereading. And then a year after that, it made its way into Invisible Planets, Ken Liu's Chinese sci-fi anthology. And it was the only story by Hao Jingfang in there, although there's more in his second anthology, Broken Stars. And it's in Invisible Planets. That's where I read it for the first time. So you've told us a little bit about how the story was received in China. Do you know much about its splash on the BBS or in the two magazines it was published in?
Well, actually, unfortunately, I don't know. I know the name of the story when it won the 16 Hugo Award from online basically, and I read the story. The Chinese version was included in one of the monographs or the story collection featuring Hao Jingfang herself, and also the English version from Invisible Planets. So if you don't tell me, I won't know about the BBS stuff. Yeah, but I probably can know about the original. I know it's something uncanny, but I don't know where originally in Chinese is it published.
Sure.
So, but I can check it out. I can check it out about it.
Yeah, I might go digging. If I just pop Beijing Judea into Google or Baidu, I can maybe see where it takes me. I found it just in the course of this podcast, it's really interesting to see just how many novels that I've done episodes on got their start on not just online fiction websites, but bulletin boards. The last one I did, Unfinished Crime, that was a web novel. This one was on a BBS, and Leave Me Alone by Murong Chuetsun. That one started on like his pharmaceutical company's online fiction website. It's really interesting to see how much stronger online or like web novels seem to be in China versus in the English language. Do you read any web novels, or are you more of a print and ebook person?
I'm not a person very up to the web novels, unfortunately. But because you were there in the symposium.
Oh yes.
Well, yeah, there's a PhD from Leeds. There are two actually. From the same panel with me, and they are talking about how this kind of Chinese web novels are accepted or getting a larger attention internationally even, and they were using data to describe how Chinese web novels are, how many readers on it, and how they comment on the stories, and what's the difference between the Chinese readers and its international readers. But anyway, in China we got very, very large corpus of online novels. We got several really huge platform for that. But I can only recall one of them is called Jīng, and the one sorry, I should have got that, but I really am not really good at that.
Oh, I know the Tencent one is Qidian. That's the one I know.
Okay, Qidian as well. Yeah, we got several really large platform, and you can there's literally countless novels written by countless writers even. But we also have we indeed also have some really big names for the web novels. They only publish online. They only share their stories online, and a few of them can be published physically by some of the publishers. But yeah, basically they are just online. And my girlfriend is a huge fan for online novels, but unfortunately I'm not. But I can ask her about how online literature in China developed. And there's also another PhD at SOAS, my friend at SOAS, and she's been doing the online Chinese literature as a literary phenomenon, basically. And she's doing this kind of strong female characters in the stories, I guess. I'm not very sure. I can check with her later.
Sure. Yeah, I do think it's interesting that so there on sites like Qidian, there's an awful lot of, I guess, what you would say, the kind of stories you'd only find online, like very genre-ish, very made for those readers and that market. But then we also have stories here like Beijing Jidea, which is, I don't know what I would kind of call it, like amazing literary speculative fiction, also which had its birth on a bulletin board.
Also,
yeah.
Another, do you know the Three-Body Problem series?
Of course.
By Xin, and there are fourth one by a different author, which is originally.
Bao Shu. English name is The Redemption of Time, also published by Tor and Head of Zeus.
Yeah.
And the same kind of book cover design as Three-Body.
Yeah, so they are kind of how do you call it? The 4 books in series, the trilogy after the.
Oh,
You have names.
quad or quin? I think quin is 5, so that would be a quadrilogy. Although I think they usually go for series or cycle because it doesn't sound as dorky as quadrilogy.
Fancy term.
Yeah. And you could keep on going. You had 6, that would be a sextilogy. 7 would be a sept, but then it gets ridiculous. So you just say series.
Okay.
But in theory, you could use those words. Yeah. So I think we've talked enough about web novels. But what is my next question? Let me see. Oh, yes. So this is about the real Beijing. I've only been to real Beijing twice, both quite briefly. Although, of course, I did live in Shanghai 2.5 years, so I've got a little bit of an experience of a mega city, and definitely you can really feel the social divides, huge gaps between not just people of low and high income, but like the buildings and the communities. It's like side by side worlds. So the question I'd have for you, I guess there's two. Have you spent a lot of time in the real non-folding Beijing, or do you have much experience in even a city like London, never mind Chinese cities, that
Yeah.
rings true with this story by Hao Jingfang?
Right. I have been in Beijing several times, but none of them was longer than 3 days, I guess.
All right.
There to visit, to go to the airport and to go to visit some of my friends before going to the airport. And I went to apply for my visas everywhere. But basically, that's why I find myself in Beijing. But I have spent some time in Shanghai with my girlfriend. I spent like more than 1 year, I think. But that's not enough. I also live in London for quite a long time. But basically, I think this story is, yeah, as I said before, it's not only about Beijing. It's about basically every megacity. It's not even to be a megacity. Every place in the world, actually, because I read a kind of a interview of Hao Jingfang on why she was writing such a kind of story. I forgot where I get that idea, but somewhere, yes. And she said that before she wrote the story, she was like working in Beijing, and she got very regular life every day, and every morning she just went into the skyscraper, very tall building skyscraper to find her office. And before that, she will say hello to the reception, and also she will say like something to get the food delivery for lunch, and she will say thank you. But she soon found out that these people are actually from different spaces. They are connected by saying this kind of brief greetings and saying thank you, saying hello every day, and they are connected, but they are not the same, because that is the only way. The hello is the only word probably you will say to the reception, even throughout this year.
Yeah, you mean that's the only standard Mandarin this worker knows?
Actually, yeah, that happens everywhere. Yeah, that happens everywhere. This kind of because her idea basically is that although we live in the same city, but we are not living the same.
Okay. I see. Space in an abstract sense.
Yeah, that's her point.
Right.
Although
Very true.
you and your reception meet every day. You can shake hands. You can do that whatever you like. But basically, you are from different space, and you like the place of some people does not belong to other groups. So that's what she got why she got the idea. So she just came to what if Beijing can be folded into spaces and put this kind of invisible, because in our real life, this kind of boundary is invisible, but make this kind of invisible boundary visible in the story and tangible from the experience of the main characters in the story, and to visualize this kind of the stratification or segregation, actually, the segregation of different social groups, and how they interact with each other, and how they are separated from each other, and how they, as a city, as an entity, all this kind of groups can make up the city from different perspectives.
Even where I'm sitting right now in the suburbs, you can feel it because the little road my mum lives on, it's totally middle class suburbia. Everyone has a garden. This house used to be one floor bungalow, but we built into the attic. It's now a little 2-floor house. But just maybe a few hundred meters away, there's a little part of the suburb that used to be the richest mile in the world back when we were an industrial city. There's all these great big, like almost mansions, some very big houses that factory owners used to own, and now it's not factory owners living there, but it is very well off people. But if you go in the other direction, the other side of the traffic lights, the other side of the park, so it really is physically separated by quite a couple large boundaries, grass and busy roads and complicated traffic lights. There's a council estate called Douglas, and that's got some I'm sure it's not one of the worst estates in the country, but it's got some serious problems. And the difference between my nice little suburb, Broughty Ferry, and Douglas is, I think you would notice it pretty much immediately. And again, if you went from the little suburban or the middle class part into the parts of my suburb with the large houses, you can see it quite quickly as well.
Yeah.
But the access is much easier, just like in Hao Jingfang's stories. The separation between top and middle is way thinner with the bottom and the other places.
Actually, I can feel the same in London. It's more like obvious in London actually. If you the one of the street can be really dodgy and full of trash and like it's not that clean, but maybe just 1 or 2 blocks away is a very clean area or district for the rich people to live in, just like the South Kensington, where South Kensington, where all the rich people get their house over there. But it also has I think you know about the fire of 2 years ago.
Vaguely.
Yeah, there was a resident tower on South Kensington provided.
Grenfell.
Grenfell, yeah, that
Yes,
one.
of course, I know Grenfell. Yeah.
That morning I was literally woke up by the helicopters. Actually, yeah, that morning I was there as well. But they are in the same area. They are not far from each other, but you feel this kind of segregated boundary from the people from different classes.
Yeah, I remember just after Grenfell happened and all the survivors were left homeless, I think the opposition leader or someone in the opposition party floated the idea of putting these people up in empty luxury flats that people just owned to rent for holidays or whatever. And almost immediately there was pushback from the wealthy owners of these flats. No way, not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
So it just goes to show, even in this horrible tragedy, people try to enforce these boundaries. They won't even give refuge to people who've lost their homes. Kind of horrible.
Because I noticed the concept of boundaries getting famous or welcome this year, especially because I got 3 journals or conferences or symposiums. They mentioned the theme of this year will be crossing boundary. They're trying to get some of just a boundary, some are like crossing boundary, like the reading group based at Birkbeck. We got to London science fiction research community, and the reading group for this academic year until the next August will be boundary, I guess. We've got boundaries, visible, invisible, tangible, intangible, but we have to try to break them, or it can be broken. I don't know. Yeah.
I guess a thing that Hao Jingfang's story doesn't touch on, but that plays into all this, is gentrification when these people live side by side. Just a wee recommendation for listeners. There was a really good film just this year or last year from America called Blind Spotting, set in Oakland. I think is that in California? And it follows two. Sorry?
Is it recommended to me as well?
Oh, sure, yeah. If you're interested in this idea of space, sure. Yeah. So it follows 2 underclass characters. One's a white guy, one's a black guy, and they have this love-hate relationship with all the various hipsters they have to deal with that live in the neighborhood. And it's like dealt with in the film as a kind of a central focus, if not the main theme, definitely theme number 2. It's a really good and also very different examination of, modern inequality and people folded on top of each other in a way. Which leads into my next kind of topic or question. So if you go on Uncanny Magazine and you click on the little bio they've put for Hao Jingfang, there's another piece by her up there. It's an article, a non-fiction, and it's got a really nice long title, which I'm sure would sound pretty good in Chinese because it's a translation. It's another translation by Ken Liu. So the English title is "I Want to Write a History of Inequality." And you can maybe guess from that name, it's a bit of a reflection on the theme of folding Beijing. In that article, Hao Jingfang talks a lot about her job. She works at the China Development Research Foundation, so she's really not just a writer. And at that foundation, she's tasked with basically studying, researching, and making small measures to alleviate inequality. I think she's done a lot of work in rural areas, but I'm sure she's done stuff in cities as well. Do you know much, Guangzhao, about Hao Jingfang's broader concerns, maybe in her other works? Have you read anything else by her?
Well, I just read like the interview I just mentioned about how she has developed this kind of idea of writing folding Beijing. But basically, I think she's very frank in that essay you mentioned about you want to write a history of inequality, because if she just say inequality straightforwardly, it means there are some inequalities in China right now and also in every city that can fit in folding the structure of folding Beijing as well. Because if you got differences, there will be inequality. Especially you got 3 different spaces, you got 3 different classes, even more.
Sorry, you cut out for a few seconds. Could you repeat what you said maybe for the last 5-10 seconds?
Oh, sorry, I just repeat what I said. Yeah, because I noticed like for folding Beijing and for every city that can fit in the structure of folding Beijing, and there will be inequality in their narratives, and you got different spaces, you got different classes, and you got people segregated from each other. So there will be some difference between different social groups, and you got like that kind of differences. The inequality will be inevitable in that sense, because that came to me another story from Liu Cixin as well, and there's a story from Liu Cixin called because unfortunately that one doesn't got the English translation yet.
Oh, right.
The Chinese name, because you know about the taking care of God, right?
Yep. That's so just for listeners, that's a Liu Cixin story. It's available in Invisible Planets and also The Wandering Earth. It's in both of them, and it's about a race of aliens who come down to Earth, but they all kind of look like a cartoon of God, old men with long white beards and hair, and everyone's got to look after them, a little bit like a Chinese family might look after a grandparent. So that's looking after God.
Yeah, but that one was what I want to say is not looking after God. Yeah, it's basically the similar titles called the looking after humanity, actually. Yeah, looking after humanity. But the story is totally different. The story for the looking after humanity is about you go far. If you date back to the ancient world, the humanity was divided into 4 parts, and so right now the Earth is one of the 4 parts, and one day there's a kind of the other, we call it the brother civilization, came to Earth and saying this and telling us a story of their words, and it was like there's a very rich person who can buy the entire planet, everything on it, the water, the air, all the resources belong to the one single person, and he did this perfectly legal because they are very hardworking. They know how to make business, and they can earn lots of money. And they just bought everything on the planet, and he just sent other people on the planet away to the universe and try to whatever you want to go, but not staying here and things like that. So it's basically the same thing because you got the a kind of a similar hierarchy as in Beijing as well. If you the kind of the social resources, you can get the capital and money to get what you want. You don't have to take care of the other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's basically about the inequality we have just talked about. The inequality is basically everywhere. If you got capital, there will be inequality in it. And also, if you talk about the modernity we're having right now, the inequality is one of the essential component of modernity. So if we are living in the modernity, we will have the inequality with us. So that is kind of inevitable from perspectives.
For our Chinese-speaking listeners, what's the Chinese name of that Liu Cixin story?
赡养人类.
Can you teach that to me?
Yeah, 赡养 means
赡养.
And 人类 is humanity.
Okay.
Or human beings and mankind, whatever, just 赡养人类.
赡养人类, taking care of humanity. Thank you very much. Yeah, what you were saying about Hao Jingfang and Liu Dalio being kind of aligned, it seems right that they're both a little bit pessimistic or fatalistic in their views. Like just about any Liu Cixin story, he's kind of imagining a worst case scenario and everything's kind of a fight for survival.
Yeah.
And Hao Jingfang's not quite the same as that, but in that I Want to Write History of Inequality, you're right, she kind of says inequality is inevitable, and if you want to develop an economy, increase wealth, at least from her point of view, one of the results of that will be increasing inequality. And she even framed it in the context of Chinese history. She said a lot of the mistakes that happened at the hands of imperial dynasties was them trying to deal with the inequality and all the wealth that they'd helped to create by managing society. So I don't know, I'm not an expert on such things. It's certainly, her view is quite particular. I think there might be plenty of people who'd want to disagree, but yeah, you make a good point that they're kind of both not optimists in that sense.
Yeah, I don't think Hao Jingfang, at least in this story, gets some optimistic ideas, and it's definitely not an happy ending. The story at the end of the story, yeah, because in the story, another thing I found really interesting is about the main character named Lao Dao, right?
Lao Dao, yeah.
And its stepdaughter, right? Or is it...
Adopted daughter, I think.
Okay, adopted daughter. Okay, yeah, because he wish, let's just say his daughter can, shall we? Yeah,
it's easier. Yeah,
it's easier. Yeah, because Lao Dao really wish his daughter can get a very good education, and he really wish his daughter can move up to one of the upper two classes actually, but there's kind of a model, there's kind of a target, because Lao Dao met a kind of a very young lady, right, in the top space. Her name is Yi, and she is basically the one you mentioned. Like, she doesn't have to work, but she chooses to work in the first space, and she's married, but she's also has some rumors or affairs with a boy from the second space. Basically, that kind of image, the image of upper class young lady, is what Lao Dao wish his daughter to be in the future through getting good education, through getting whatever he can to get his daughter a promising environment to move up, to do this kind of stuff. But Lao Dao doesn't like Yi in that case. He thought Yi was basically kind of a puppet. Yi didn't have a strong agency or reactivity in creating her own values, but still he wished his daughter can be in this way, because only in this way can a person really be attached to the social matrix and to the social discourse, and they can really get some or create some value to themselves even, and also to the society. So that is something I found really really a satire or such as a satire in this case.
Mm.
Only you have to see like your daughter to become a kind of image you don't like, but only this kind of you don't like image can be the one that really functions in the society.
That is an interesting take. The thing that popped into my head on the reread about his wee daughter, I forgot her name. I know it's the same word twice, but yeah. Anyway, his daughter. I remember it says he wants to get her into not just a normal kindergarten, but a kindergarten with music classes because she seems to innately respond really well to music. She loves to dance about, and it reminded me of my own experience working as a foreign teacher in China, where a thing you notice straight away about Chinese parents, or at least the ones you come into contact with, is they want their kids educated from the get-go. The starting kind of entry to education, the bar is already high. And yeah, you can see that Lao Dao has this goal. He's got these aspirations, but like you're saying, the odds they seem to be really heavily stacked against him and his daughter, even if he does manage to secure some money to get the kid into the nursery. It's not clear that that's going to lead on any skyrocketing trajectory right to the top.
Right, yeah, because in China we got a special term for this kind of competition. It's called to win at the starting point or starting.
Oh.
Yeah, because you from the very early stage of the children education, like the nursery, like the primary school, you have to make sure that your children can get something special.
Mm-hmm.
Like in this case, his daughter liked to dance. Oh, okay, we will find some place where you can learn some dancing skills or some musicals or some other like calligraphy or other. If you are a bit talented in math, we got some math special, really special math classes in China as well.
I wonder if I can be annoying. Can you teach me that phrase, to win at the start?
To win at the starting or start line or starting line in English. Yeah, because that's just kind of a race. Yeah, from the race before it starts, it's kind of everyone was lined up and waiting for the whistle, right? But someone, if you got some special skills, can move your starting line. In advance.
How do you say that in Mandarin? Is that a 4-character phrase or?
It's not 5 character.
5 character.
Like 赢在 like win at.
赢在 like
起跑 like the running race.
Okay.
Yeah.
赢来在起 Oh no, sorry, I lost it.
赢在
起跑线.
Yeah, that one exactly.
Okay, I shall look that up after we're done talking. It's funny how that manifests where I'm from in my middle class neighborhood is also related to space. So in Dundee, we've got one private school. All the other schools are state schools. So generally speaking, among the kind of society or the part of society I'm from, there's not really a great rush to try and get into the private school because it's very expensive. Okay. The competition is more which catchment area of the state school your kid goes to, because some of the state schools are better than others, although they're all free and guaranteed. So the real competition is where you get your house, because being in the zone of the best school gets your kid into that school, and in theory gets them a better education. So it's probably less intense than China, but I think there's a similar thing just manifested in a different way according to the system.
It is the same thing, actually. Because in China, you know the hukou system, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because everyone was registered according to where they live. And that's the reason, because also in China, we got right now, we got very strict like school registration system, is that it's really difficult if you to get into another school which not belongs to the area you're living in. So that's basically where you buy the house, where you buy the apartment. It is the one of the direct reasons or reasons, or one of the direct influences on where your children can get their education. So that's what we call. I'm not sure if I can translate into the right or proper English term, but I will try. That was called we call some houses or apartments located in a very good area in terms of schools and education, and they are called 学区房, right? You can just call it education areas, houses or apartments.
学房.
No, 学区.
Oh, 学房. Okay.
学 you can say it's a school, like education 学.
Uh-huh.
区 is area.
Okay.
And 房 is house.
Like, yeah. Oh, lots of good vocabulary in this episode.
It's a Chinese class.
Yeah, thank you. I have to pay you some money. So here's a couple terms. I want to get on to talking about the actual story, and food jumped out at me on my first reading and the second. So I noticed in third space, the dish that I would really want to eat that's described more than once is, I think Ken Leo's translation calls it hot and sour soup. I would imagine that's probably Swen La Fun, sour spicy noodle soup. But in the middle zone, I think we only get one description of food, and it's maybe the most sci-fi. Well, aside from the folding city, it's maybe the most sci-fi thing. It's a machine that just makes some decent-looking food for you. Although I don't think it's specified what the food is. But then once we get into first space, I noticed the Chinese food vanishes. The food we see is, I guess there's sanwen and there's sanwenzhi. There's salmon and there's sandwiches. So there's Japanese sushi and Western like snack food. So it felt to me, if there was anything going on there, it was that there's a little bit more authenticity in some ways, or a little bit more locality down on the first, the lowest tier. And then the higher up you go, the more globalized and international and kind of homogenous things get. Did you get the same impression, or do you think I'm talking nonsense?
Oh, but I haven't thought about that, frankly speaking, but I would say it's a very interesting approach if you just see the story from that perspective. Yeah, I would say like, also because it depends on which kind of venue can you find these food, like the Swan La Fen from the bottom is from the bottom space. It's basically the street food. China, you don't usually sell sandwiches as street food, right? You won't buy it if you were, right? Yeah.
No. I think the only cheap sandwiches I got in Shanghai were ones from like Family Mart, and they're not really. They're a bit strange.
Get the sandwiches, but not from the street food.
No, never, no.
From the story, at least, the description of food in the third space is basically street food. Street food,
yes. No one's cooking for themselves in that.
Just a very simple restaurant, and you can eat from the restaurant. You think it basically stuff like that. But if you move up to the first space, basically the story was talking about this kind of conference, right, or symposium, and they are offering some food, and these are really fancy food. I forgot the details about kind of which kind of food have been served in that symposium, but I would say sandwiches and also other like some kind of a westernized food in the first place is kind of a label for this kind of globalization, and you get some connections to the rest of the world, and you get something different. But if you lack that kind of a connection, you will only have what you have already, which is Swan La Fen and all the Chinese street food in this case.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I think we touched on it briefly, the inflation. This is something I think I missed in the first reading, and it jumped out in the second. So you notice straight away that things, the amount of yuan people are paying for things is higher than they'd be paying now, I guess because we're in the future and inflation is real. But then we learn that inflation, by the way the economic system works, inflation has kind of been frozen in the third space, and in the first two, it's accelerated. But as someone who only has a very basic knowledge of economics, I wasn't entirely sure what to make of that. Did it jump out at you any more than it jumped out at me?
Well, about the inflation, we have to talk about that. I noticed that, yeah, I was just reading the story for the first time because it really came to me from the perspective that the inflation is a marker that that means that this kind of a people or a social community in the third space or the bottom space of the in the folding Beijing is that they are totally segregated from any kind of social activity from the upper two spaces, and especially from the economic perspective, and because the inflation should be something universal to society, and technically it's kind of the rising of price comprehensively or universally in the price. But this kind of a change, this kind of in some cases, the inflation can be a normal phenomenon. But even the normal phenomenon, or this kind of some kind of a really serious inflation in the society cannot be filled by the bottom people because they are not able to get access to the capital itself. If they are away from the capitalist system, they won't be feeling anything about the inflation. They won't be feeling anything about the economic activities that keep every players in the game. They're out of the game.
Right. Speaking of the game, so we've talked quite a bit about third space and first space, the bottom and the top classes. But again, on this reread, a thing that I picked up on more was the second space characters we meet, who are, the impression I got is although they seem to be living in a very comfortable environment, they're also, whether it's by necessity or more by the ideology, they all seem to be working themselves quite hard. They don't seem incredibly comfortable in that sense. And I think every second space character we meet, with the exception of one guy I think he's sitting on his floor and playing video games, everyone else is suited up for work and is work. Do you have many thoughts about that?
Well, that is basically a very realistic reflection of what China is right now, especially in the big cities. And yeah, because especially for middle class and young people, and I thought it's a few months ago there's a social debate on whether the young people should be working. We call it 996. It's called from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Oh, this is Ma Yun said something about this, right?
Yeah. It's 996, or in some cases it's even worse. You have to it's called the 007. You get that? Yeah, but some, especially the bosses from the big companies, they will encourage especially the young people, saying that if you're young, you should be hardworking and you should get the value for the company, and you should get the dreams and some kind of dream that you will be respected for your contribution for the society right now, but that will see in the future. But in that, you have to keep working to sacrifice yourself to burn yourself, metaphorically, of course, to make the society a better place, or even to make the company a more successful one. And that means that you have to make money for me, and you make money for me, and you have to sacrifice. But very important, very interestingly, some people do buy this stuff, and they really believe in that way. They believe that as a young person, we got extra energy, that we got time, and we should be spending this time in creating values. So that is basically what was reflected in the stories, that people keep working and people keep refreshing their CVs. Basically, I'm doing this because I want to write a few sentences on the CV to make it feel better.
Oh, it's too real. Oh man.
That's why part of the reason why I got the Leeds Symposium. Don't say anyone. I'm not.
Yep. The symposium is on the CV, or if it's not on the CV, I try and shoehorn it into interviews or the covering letter.
Oh yeah. So that's basically what we all are doing right now, and that from some perspective, it is kind of a digitalization of human's subjectivity, because our value are mainly depends on the words and sentences we put on the paper, we put on the CV paper.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you circulate the CV online and send a message, you send an email to your supervisor, saying, I want to do this, I want to take this job, and your supervisor like, well, just read the sentence, read the sentences you wrote for the CV and determine whether you to give this job or not. So that's one of the ways that people are reducing their subjectivity into the data, into the labels and symbols or words and sentences, and eventually to the discourse itself.
Mm-hmm. So we've got 3 points on that. So one is I was looking over my CV recently, and I noticed in the address part, so the address I'm at, I'm assuming no listener is going to come and attack me, is 5 Claypots Place. And I noticed that the L as well as the P in place was capitalized. And I was like, oh my God, I've sent this thing off with the extra incorrect capital. Has that lost me chances? Quite possibly. Because it's publishing companies. So like you said, one sentence, even one letter could ruin it. The other thing about becoming a digital self or a digital CV self, one of the symposium people recently found me online. It was Jeff Kinkley, and he told me the first place that he found me, I don't know how he went about it, it was LinkedIn. So I was hoping the podcast would be easiest to find where I actually talk about it the most, SoundCloud or Twitter or Instagram, places where I'm not completely a robot. But it was actually LinkedIn, the digital CV that he found me on. There was a third thing. Oh yeah, I think it was notable that the second space characters we met were all 20-somethings. And I think maybe in the first half of their 20s as well, really quite young.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Also, because I can recall you talking about the address and the CV. Actually, that was some techniques, because it feels really different to put your address like the South Kensington. I like your dog. Yeah.
Oh, he's outside. Why is he going crazy?
Yeah, and
I think my little sister just got home, so he's going crazy.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, because if you put your address in South Kensington on the CV, it feels really different if you put somewhere like New Cross, somewhere around London suburb, not that.
Right. Well, my problem is Dundee. I'm applying to London. London people don't know where Dundee is.
Yeah, that's not your problem. That's your
Indeed. Yeah, that's what I tell myself when I'm shaking my fists and crying.
No, I don't. Yeah, some people are quite, secretly speaking, a bit arrogant. I can fit that, and they don't care about the people from the outside London, the pan-London area, London metropolitan.
I was looking at a job ad for I think it was an internship or something in London, and it had like a bit where it's like type in the city you live in. So I put Dundee, and then it says choose an area in a drop-down list with a set number of options, and all the options in the drop-down were just places in London.
No.
So you could put your own city, but then when you were saying which part of the city, only London options. So I don't know how that happened, but I guess it's emblematic of that attitude. Some people call it the fifth country in the UK: Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, London.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Fifth country, yeah.
Holding London.
Holding London, yeah. You can write something about that.
I should, yeah. Some fanfic online.
Yeah.
Next question. So this is about real China and real Beijing. How relocating from one place to another is a kind of a hardness, and it made me think a wee bit about the other piece of Chinese sci-fi I'd read just recently, which also has these migrant workers, lower tier people dealing with relocating, and it's Waste Tide by Chen Qiufan, also who was in attendance at the symposium. And I noticed as I was reading, our hero Lao Dao, he deals with trash and recycling, just like the characters in Waste Tide. I don't know, I don't really have a specific question, but do you have any thoughts about the theme in not just this story, but other Chinese sci-fi of migrant workers and their relationship with waste?
Well, yeah, the most representative example in this case will be Chen Qiufan's Waste Tide. Yeah, That's easy because I was writing about Chen Shifang's waste time for my upgrade report, and I was trying to discuss this kind of the conflict between the migrant workers and the local people, and there's still a kind of a boundary. Yeah, there's a boundary between them, and because because I thought I think I mentioned about the West Tide and migrant workers and native people in the Lee Symposium as well. And now I'm trying to adopt one of Foucault's idea about heterotopia, the place of otherness, to conceptualize this kind of conflict and especially their relation between each other, the relation between humans and waste, etc. Yeah, the migrant workers is one of the very important academic topics, both for literature and also for sociology, for linguistics, even. Yeah, it's a really important theme.
I'm pretty sure that a lot of the listeners to the show know a little bit about what the term migrant worker means in the Chinese context, but if you don't and you're interested in learning about the country more broadly, just stick in Chinese migrant workers into Google. It's just a completely different concept from what a migrant worker is in the UK, and I'm sure a lot of Europe. And the hukou system as well, HUKOU. If you don't know about hukous, it's well worth looking into. We have been going a while, so I'm going to zap ahead ever so slightly to asking you a little bit more about 科幻研究在伦敦, the Chinese Sci-fi in London group.
A lovely reading group.
Yes. So we've done the elevator pitch for Folding Beijing. Could you give us an elevator pitch for the group?
If you want to read Chinese science fiction in London, that is the place you go. How is that?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to find the group, what's the best place to get in touch, digitally or in person?
In person, that's me. Yeah, in person that would be me and my friend Angela Chen, and she was a student from King's, and she's been really interested in climate change fictions, and she's running another artistic platform, I think, called Worm. It's called worm.org, where she's a kind of a curator, a really experienced curator on the creating many kind of artistic projects which you can find on her website. But for the science fiction reading group, London Chinese science fiction reading group, we are also available on Twitter, on Facebook. We got a mailing list, and also if you got WeChat, the most convenient stuff is to just contact me and to follow our WeChat official account, which is SF in London. If you search for the official account, because we have to search on the official account searching area, you can find it, but not the area you try to find some text. Yeah.
Can I share your WeChat ID with the listeners, if that would be helpful for them?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's lovely.
Right. So I'll pop it in the show notes.
Yeah, my WeChat ID also probably the ID for the platform.
Okay, that will be in the show notes for you guys listening if you want to add Guangzhao on there. So you've told us how the group began. Have you done any really amazing things? And do you have any really amazing things lined up in the future?
Well, the really amazing things, apart from the monthly reading group, which all are amazing, but we have managed to invite Chen Qiufan in August to give a talk on his thoughts about waste recycling and also about waste tide, the story itself. And that was back in August, and sadly he wasn't here like specifically for us. He was traveling to Dublin for the World Science Fiction Convention. But we still feel very honored to have him here to give a very enlightening and inspiring lecture on this kind of topic. And also we are trying to organize a kind of a conference, science fiction study conference on specifically on Chinese science fiction somewhere in London. Well, it is a very brief idea. We have to talk about that in more details in the next couple of weeks, I think. So because we hope to have this conference in next summer, in next year, summer or September or October, sometime around that. So that means we have to came up with the call for papers as soon as possible, and to contact the possible potential keynotes. Yeah, but that was definitely on the table. So we are thinking about that, and
that sounds awesome.
We are trying to push it. So you are definitely invited.
Oh, hell yeah.
Paper. Yeah.
Yep, I'd go to London for that, definitely. You've told us how the group began. You've told us awesome things you're doing. What kind of people attend? I'm very curious about this.
They came from different perspectives, and each of them got different background. Some are students, some are working, some are Chinese related, whether they are born in Britain or in China or any other places in the world, and also some people from different disciplines. Discipline like we got literature students, we got students from based in education, based in scientific stuff, based in everything. Yeah, basically it's everything.
That's the best possible answer. Awesome. Couple challenge. Oh, sorry. What were you saying?
No. I like the diversity of the participants. It's really like wonderful appearance to have a reading group. You meet different people from different, absolutely different places and background.
Crossing boundaries, you might say.
Exactly.
There you go. So on the topic of crossing boundaries, here's a couple snappy questions. First one, what would you say to a science fiction fan who isn't yet interested in Chinese sci-fi?
This is a really large question.
Indeed.
I would say that Chinese science fiction is a bit different with the so-called the science fiction stories with Western traditions. But I know the British sci-fi and the American sci-fi is very different from each other. But basically, the Chinese version of the science fiction stories is different from all of them. We've got special. You can call it exoticism, maybe, or it's just got something different. And if you were feeling differently, that's the experience. It's some experiences we can't get from a Sula Lagoon. You can't get from a PKD. You can't get from J.G. Ballard, etc. But the Chinese is Chinese, and you have to try it until you know that you like it or not. Just try it, and
Yeah, and there's so many books you could point someone like that to these days. I think even just a link to this story on Uncanny Magazine would be a good entry point to Chinese sci-fi. Or if they like hard sci-fi, I guess Three Body Problem's the way to go. Or even if it's something maybe a bit more, I don't know, international, there's Waste Tide. So the options are in translation are expanding, and that's great.
Waste Tide is also very good for those who are interested in climate stuff.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah. Eco sci-fi. A second snappy question. What would you say to someone who just refuses to read any sci-fi at all? Do you think you could try and win them over?
Well, I normally, if I meet some people don't read or refuse to read any science fiction instead, or don't know about any science fiction, they refuse to read.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, what did you say?
They refuse to read the science fiction, or they...
Yeah.
Okay, but...
If they're actively against it and you need to change their mind.
Well, yeah, normally I won't change their mind.
Would you try?
Yeah. Science fiction is not... I would say science fiction is not about science. And it's the kind of alternative platform where you can play everything we have right here and right now, and to give it this kind of speculative possibilities, because science fiction is it's basically about the alternatives, and you are creating alternatives, you are expanding the alternatives, which is a very important supplement to what is called the mainstream literature, talking about the realistic world. We have to keep that kind of because normally people will say about imagination about science fiction, but I won't say about imagination. I would just say it's a different world. It's about alternatives, and this is a very good way to change the reality.
Absolutely. Well said. Amen. So we've talked a lot about your group and the book. Now I'd like to ask some things about you, since you're the guest. So Guangzhao, when did you first really connect with sci-fi? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, there's a very impressed event for me, actually.
That's exactly what I want to hear.
Yeah, that was, I think I was 10 when I was when I was taking the grade in the primary, the third year in my primary school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was at my grandparents' home, and my mom came with a book. It's from Jules Verne. It's about, I forgot the English title for that. It's kind of a submarine.
Oh, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Exactly, that one. So I read that one over and over again. So I just came, science fiction is my stuff. So,
cool.
but after that, I wasn't spending too much time in reading science fiction. But I always keep that idea in mind. Sooner or later, I will do something for or about science fiction. Yeah, this is a very long time.
Yeah, it's fair. I think my intro to it was maybe a little more gradual, because as a teenager, a lot of the well, it was called teen fiction at the time. It's now called YA. It's the same thing. A lot of that stuff that I read was fantasy or sci-fi or horror, but I didn't think of it as sci-fi per se. It was just stuff I liked. And then I became older and thought I had to read serious books and turned away a little bit from these more magical things. But when I was becoming, quote unquote, a bit more serious, I read a few H.G. Wells books. The first one, I was definitely still in high school, and it was just before the Steven Spielberg War of the Worlds came out. And yeah, H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, I think that was an excellent intro, I suppose, to early sci-fi. A little bit like you and your Julius Verne's, just I was much older. I think I tried reading 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea when I was a kid, and couldn't do it. It was too big, and it was one of these very small editions. The text, the font was really squished together and small.
Yeah, I see. I can read the book because it's a kind of a children version.
Oh, okay.
Pictures inside. It's simplified.
Yeah. Young Angus could have done with some more pictures.
You can. Young Angus can do.
So we've established your first connection with sci-fi. How about your first connection with domestic sci-fi, Chinese sci-fi?
Domestic sci-fi, actually, the first one that came across is Three-World Problem.
Right.
Because I was spending some time in reading this kind of American or British science fiction stories, and not that focused on the so-called domestic Chinese science fiction. But after the Three-World Problem, I started to look into this kind of Chinese science fiction, because I suddenly noticed there are so many things, so many fantastic stories just around me, and I didn't notice. Really shame.
Right, yeah. My entry point to Chinese sci-fi was the exact same. I just saw some article about Three Body.
Oh, really?
It gave, I think I might have said this on a previous episode with someone else, but because this was kind of my entry to all translated Chinese fiction. But the article described it was making it out like it was describing the plot of the first book, but it was really more the Dark Forest plot about racing to catch up with the approaching invaders. And I thought, wow, this is a premise I really like. And so I guess we had basically the same entry point. Three Body. I'm sure that's the same for a lot of people.
We are comrades.
Yes. What is that? 通知, right?
同志, yeah.
Yeah, 科幻通知.
No, they don't
No?
say 同志 in very frequently in daily conversation because sometimes they will mean gay men.
Aha, yeah.
So
what's a better word?
志 sounds to me a bit weird. Yeah,
Okay.
don't do it.
Right. 科幻朋友, or is that too cute?
That's cool.
Okay. Sorry to freak you out there.
No. Yeah. Just Chinese. Yeah, just like a British culture. I'm still suffering from that.
So you've talked a wee bitty about your thesis, and we touched on how your next chapter is going to be the chapter with Folding Beijing and that British book. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So can you describe where that chapter is going to go, or is it still formulating? Is it better if we skip this topic?
I still don't know actually. I'm still trying to finish the other one, the Rafts, the British one I'm going to compare.
Okay. Can you tell us a wee bit about Raft then?
The Raft is it was published as the Masterworks, Sci-fi Masterworks, the kind of a series, and it's a publishing scales. Or
I am afraid I don't.
No, you don't really.
I'm a fool.
There's a kind of, I'm trying to find the name of the publisher. No, I can't forget it.
Well, it's not because they're obscure. It's because I'm ignorant.
Yeah, no, because there's one single publisher trying to collect all the classical sci-fi stories and make new editions of them.
Okay.
So one of them. So that was published in 1991, which is right at the beginning, or right at the very early stage of the British science fiction boom. This one was basically about the segregation of spaces, because in a very special universe, Stephen Baxter got a series of his universe called Xeelee, Xeelee, Xeelee universe, and in this book, some people are living on the raft, which is a kind of it used to be a spaceship, and all the technology, life support.
My dog's singing a song for you.
Thank him. Yeah, thank him. Yeah, I really enjoy it. Yeah. Okay. Some people are living on the raft, which is to some degree that resembles the first or second space in Folding Beijing, and also some people living on the belt, which is basically the bottom line, the bottom space in Beijing as well. But the difference is the belt and the raft, in some cases, are still connected, and they have to do some business between each other. But in Folding Beijing, it's definitely it's absolutely excluded from each other, right? So that is a kind of from space segregation, or the kind of different classes, social stratification, but from some perspective, they're still different. So that's the basic reason why I wish to set up a kind of equivalence between each other, to find or to make a comparative. Yeah, basically that.
Interesting. So you mentioned a couple times that Raft, that book was part of the 90s British sci-fi boom. And we also touched on how in the 70s there was a new wave of British sci-fi. So although this is pretty off topic for the show, I think it's interesting, and it's something I don't know about. So what's the difference between the 70s new wave of UK sci-fi and the boom in the 90s?
Oh, very good question, which can lead you to academic.
Yes.
Yeah. The British we don't usually call it British New Wave. We just call it New Wave.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of an international phenomenon, where, because before, especially before the 60s, that's the 40s and 50s, and science fictions are basically equivalent to the spacecraft, right? And also the just like the Isaac Asimov, the Foundation series, about the universe, about it's kind of a space opera. Yeah, space opera is quite famous during that period. But from the new wave, especially people like I think it's Michael Moorcock or J.G. Ballard. Yeah, people like starting to say that science fiction is not about this kind of the huge or macro stuff. It's about the human ourselves. So we have to look into the ourselves and to write science fiction is about ourselves, about the near future, about the humanities. So that is when the science fiction is gradually becoming soft. Yeah, metaphorically soft. We call hard science fiction. Actually, we don't have a term called soft science fiction, but we just use the term soft to distinguish this kind of new wave science fiction from the hard science fiction, which is represented by the space opera.
Yeah, so at one end of the spectrum, spacey, physics, sciencey, big, and the other end of the spectrum, more psychological, human, less science, less space, smaller scale, general. That's the general dichotomy, right?
Yeah, and from the 90s, there's kind of two major branches of the British sci-fi boom. One of them is called the new space opera, because the space opera was not that famous during the new wave period. So we have a so-called new space opera, which is because in the traditional space opera, we got especially the Star Trek. You know the Star Trek.
Of course, yeah.
Star Trek is a very typical space opera. I mean, it's a television program, but still representative. It's basically people are trying to expand or proliferate their own values to this kind of other beings.
It's quite grandiose vision.
Yeah. There's kind of very obvious conflict between the self and the other. But in the new space opera, this kind of boundary between right and wrong, between hero and villain, are becoming less obvious. They are blurring. This hero can be villain at some point of the story, but we can feel a kind of struggling in the heroes. We can feel this kind of hesitance, everything like that. So the heroes becoming more ambiguous. So the ambiguity in the new space opera is one of the very important. You can say it's kind of a how do you call it? Elevator pitch.
Oh, the elevator pitch. Yeah.
Elevator pitch. And the other branch of this British sci-fi boom is called the new weird. Someone like the China medieval, like Perdido Street Station, Bracken, London, City. So he's trying to connect all the fantastic stuff into the science fiction. So the boundary between fantasy and science fiction are blurring as well. So we don't have that kind of a strong or clear boundary. This is fantasy, and this is not, and this is science fiction, and this is not. We don't have that kind of sense anymore. So
it's speculative fiction now.
Right. Yeah, we got a new term for that. The difference between new wave and the British sci-fi boom. The new wave is very well studied, actually. It's a very important movement in the global science fiction history. But the British sci-fi boom is less known in that case. I only got the name from my supervisor, who was a huge science fiction fan when he was young. He just got me. If you are looking into the Chinese science fiction movement in the 90s, we got equivalents in the UK. And I told him, oh, really? I don't know. I heard nothing about that. Yeah, so because translation stuff, because in China, the publishers are only focusing on this kind of well-established writers and famous works. The stories in the British sci-fi boom is less in China. It's less known in China. They have sort of proper translations as well. So yeah, that's a shame.
As you were going through your description of the different movements there, I thought of a couple parallels between the UK sci-fi writers and Chinese ones. So the first one, I think this was a book of which I gave the elevator pitch to you, and possibly our little group that went out to the pub afterwards, but definitely to yourself. So it's J.G. Ballard's High Rise, which is another story that just like Folding Beijing, splits apart different segments of society by space, but it's even more segmented because it's in a new high-rise building, which I guess in post-war Britain was a new, almost a kind of sci-fi vision of the future. One that ended up failing, and his version is quite different from the failure that happens in his book is different from how it failed in reality. But in his version, every floor of the tower gets more upper class as you go closer to the top. And for reasons that are not 100% realistic, society kind of breaks down and it ends up, there's like an all-out war between all the different floors, as well as an individualistic battle to the top. So if you want a more bloody version of Folding Beijing, listeners could go looking for that. It is a really great book. J.G. Ballard's a great writer. And then I think we talked about our mutual enjoyment of Ian Banks, a 90s boom sci-fi writer. And I have to big up him because he's a fellow Scot and an amazing guy as well, who wrote great sci-fi and great quote-unquote literary fiction. But he's, I guess, if you're more of a Liu Cixin kind of guy, like bigger scale, darker visions, he's your guy. I don't think they're not twins, but I think there's similarities between them.
I suppose it was. There was something very interesting between them, but yeah, I can look into them. Yeah.
I think the thing that popped into my head about Liu Cixin, he, at least in Three Body, he really contrasts like the power difference and capabilities between different societies that live in the universe, and that's a little bit of a theme in the culture books by Ian Banks, that some societies are just so advanced it's hard to even comprehend compared with others who are closer to our level. But yeah, that's about the full extent of my thoughts there.
He's also called the Arthur C. Clarke as well.
Yeah, I've not read anything by him. I've only seen Space Odyssey, 2001, the movie.
You read the book?
No, the only properly old I've read the H.G. Wells stuff, but the only like space opera, like the original wave I've read is an Asimov book. Which one? Oh man, I forgot the name. It's the one where half the characters are like amoebas. It's a really interesting one.
Because I was mentioning Arthur C. Clarke for you because you just about this kind of a civilization that was so advanced beyond humans' imagination. This is a very important theme in Arthur C. Clarke's story. And one example is Childhood's End. Childhood's End. You heard about that?
Childhood's End. Name rings a bell.
Okay, yeah. That was talking about there are two kind of aliens in there. One of them called the Overlord, and the other one called the Overmind. The Overmind is something really up to your standards. It's something beyond human imagination, beyond conception in that case. It's so advanced. Yeah, that's really interesting. That's also very interesting because there's also kind of a hierarchy in that story. The Overmind is at the top, the Overlord in the middle, and the human beings at the bottom.
Yeah. Interesting. Last recommendation on this point. If you can't be bothered, or if listeners don't want to read the book of High Rise, the J.G. Ballard story, there's a pretty good film as well, which has some interesting versions of SOS by ABBA. So if you like ABBA, go watch that film. On that note, I'll move to one of our last few questions. So this is going back to the symposium, this question. You touched on this when you mentioned one possible reason for non-Chinese people to read Chinese sci-fi might be exoticism, how this kind of exoticizing another country or its culture or its literature, however problematic it might be, it is one way that you can end up learning them or consuming their culture. So that's the related term that popped up the symposium a few times. It was Techno-orientalism, how like in Western pop culture, there's kind of an appetite or a taste for, quote mark, East Asian visions of the future, quote mark. So if I describe it, listeners can probably picture what I mean. Lots of neon, maybe robots, maybe rain falling at night like in Blade Runner, lots of anime stuff like Akira or Ghost in the Shell, a lot of stuff from Japan or maybe Hong Kong, like old Hong Kong style visuals, all that kind of aesthetic. And a suspicion I had when I learned that Chinese sci-fi was a thing was that because the economic kind of baton or growth has shifted from Japan and Hong Kong to basically China and megacities like Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, would they be the new vision of quote unquote techno-orientalism? I don't necessarily think that will happen because I think when I was doing my dissertation research, just about everyone I asked, I posed them this question. I said, is a rising China and a rising Chinese economy going to translate to more appetite for Chinese fiction? And most of the answers were kind of doubtful at best. Do you have any thoughts, academic or speculative or whatever, about this question?
Orientalism
Yeah,
is a new term, but Orientalism
that's an older term.
case because if we can just move from Orientalism to the Techno-orientalism, so but because for the Orientalism, the so-called Oriental area, which is Eastern Asia in that case, or basically China, India, kind of are they were put as a kind of the image of otherness for the so-called Western scholars to engage the Western. They are thinking about the Western discourse, but in that case, they have to go some different image from other places to support their idea or to base their idea on. So that place is China and India as the image of otherness. So Orientalism is closely connected to otherness, and so in that therefore the Techno-orientalism is also kind of other is also talking about the image of otherness, China and Japan in this case, because we always got Hong Kong and Japanese cities, especially in Blade Runner, Ghost in the Shell, and Akira, right? Most of the cyberpunk stuff are based on, I think, basically the Japanese cities or Hong Kong or so that is a way, I think, it's kind of to put Japan and Hong Kong in the place of otherness and try to use otherness to engage in some problems or some discussions in the Western discourse. So China, because of the developments in terms of everything, especially from the scientific stuff, there might be something more cyberpunkish, more connected to this kind of so-called Techno-orientalism, I suppose so. I don't know. I have to read the stories, but in either case, this term Techno-orientalism is kind of a very we can't say colonial right now. It's not colonial anymore, but it's still kind of they're trying to find something different, trying to something of otherness and to look back to the Western self. Yeah, that's what I say. Yeah,
I think you've more or less got it there. I think as well as it being a thing that's used by Western academics, I suppose me as a consumer, it's an interesting concept in terms of just like marketing, how things are marketed or presented as an aesthetic rather than as a way of working things out. Right. So like it is one thing my little I don't know, my little aestheticizing brain looks for in these stories. And I think out of the Chinese sci-fi I've read, it's in some things more than others. But like you said, in the case of Folding Beijing, it's pretty universal. Maybe just a few things like the Swen La Fun and maybe the work ethic, the kid going to kindergarten to study music, basically. Those things are maybe local to China, but none of them are especially cyberpunk. Maybe just the street food. The street food reminds me a wee bit of Deckard having his noodles at the start of Blade Runner. But yeah, I think basically maybe it's because these books and stories are being written by Chinese people. So of course it's not going to fit these Orientalist expectations. Of course it's going to be, I don't know, more tied to reality than dreams about the future.
Yeah. Or we can think the other way, whether we got some kind of a techno-occidentalism in Chinese science fiction stories. I don't know. I just certainly the idea.
I think you might be onto something. So like when I just read Waste Tide, there's a lot of engagement with I guess one of the main characters is an American working for, well, spoilers, basically an evil corporation. I forget if it was Waste Tide or Folding Beijing. There was some line where an American character says, "We have the best healthcare, the best science, the best technology," or something. And me as a British person are like, "Wait, hold on a minute. Shut up."
American guys, right?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, based on like conversations I have with Chinese people, I think like the vision of the Occident often is a bit America-centric, or there's a little bit of overvaluing of certain things in Western society. And they are from like the focus on education and technology and the opportunities you can get in the West. Maybe that's a case of Occidentalism, but this is just me spitballing. It's not something I've written about or thought about in any great depth.
Yeah, or just try to evilize the Occidental people, right? Some of the stories.
I remember in Three Body, I was when the UN first gets together, I could feel a little bit of the Liu Cixin's perspective. I think he's not too keen. I think he likes American sci-fi, but there's things about the West I think he finds hypocritical. So like I remember in Three Body, the French and American and British UN envoys are kind of selfish and hypocritical, and I don't know, I think they don't get on well with the Chinese characters. And then there's a Russian delegate, and he's like a more normal, down-to-earth guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't notice the kind of nationality difference.
I could go on more about that. It's probably a topic for an episode on Three Body. And I don't know if that's necessarily Occidentalism, but it bounces back the other way. That's one reason I like reading Chinese sci-fi. It's going to be hard to find a Western book where a Russian character is normal and down to earth and all the more Western people are bastards. That wouldn't happen. But you can get that from Three Body, apparently.
Yeah, maybe you can try some Russian science fiction, right?
I have. I read Roadside Picnic just this year. Do you know that one?
No, I don't.
That's the one the movie Stalker is based on. Do you know that movie?
I heard about that movie.
Okay, I will talk to you about that off the show.
Okay, great.
Right. Speaking of off the show, here's a second last question. What are you reading right now, and are there any books, Chinese or otherwise, you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Well, what I'm reading right now is basically about my next chapter. So it's a very sad thing to be in PhD in science fiction, because you can't read totally out of your interest. You have to put it in line with your research, your thesis, and your supervisor's requirement in that case. But I really do have some recommendations. I really do recommend Han Song's story to everyone. But very unfortunately, his story is too difficult to be translated in many cases. So the translation of his story, is in a way we can talk about the untranslatability from with a case of Han Song's story. But
I know I have two books on my bookshelf which have translation of his works. Broken Stars, Ken Liu's anthology's got a Han Song story, and the Columbia University Press anthology, The Reincarnated Giant. I think Reincarnated Giant's a Han. No, that's a Wang Jingfang, isn't it? But there's at least one Han Song in there. That book's very expensive, though.
Basically, his translated story are short stories actually, and his long stories are even more inspiring, because I'm gonna incorporate his Rest Over America. That's one of the story, and another one is Red Ocean, and neither of them has been translated. So only the Chinese version, I'm afraid.
I'd absolutely love to read his book Underground, Ditia.
Ditia is fantastic. Yeah,
but I am not a Chinese fluent person, and that's only available in Chinese. So either I learn the language first or it gets translated first.
地铁 the subway, I think, is available in English somewhere, but
So, oh, really?
yeah, somewhere, but I'm not sure. I just
Oh.
saw the because there was a kind of document listing all the translated works of Chinese science fiction, and 地铁 is one of the.
Oh.
I never managed to find it, but
You're sure it's not in a different language, like French or something?
no, in English.
Right.
Yeah.
I need to go on the hunt.
Yeah, but yeah, I saw it somewhere, but
Okay.
I can't recall right now.
Right. So Hansong, big recommendation for Hansong. Final question: is there any of your own work or online platforms or other endeavors you'd like to promote before we say bye bye?
My WeChat.
Yeah. What is it?
No. I mean, WeChat for my reading group.
Yeah.
And your podcast. Right.
I'll be doing that after we're done. Don't worry.
Yeah.
What is the WeChat group's name that people can search for again?
It's a WeChat ID for that group. It's called SF in London.
SF in London.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what everyone in London or outside London should search up. And is everything on it posted in Chinese?
In Chinese.
Yeah. Okay. So do be aware of that.
You can write in English. It's so busy to write in English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fair. That's fair.
She can get some time to do it. So you can, if you are really like to read something in English about our reading group, it's a very good excuse for me to push her to write the English versions.
Well, there is the Twitter and there is the mailing list as well. Those are in English or bilingual, is that right?
They are in English. The Twitter, I think the name of the Twitter is London Chinese Sci-fi Group.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that's where you can get all your information about that stuff. But Guangzhao is absolutely lovely. If you reach out to him, I'm sure he'll tell you everything you need to know. Yeah. So I think that's about everything we've got time for. It's certainly all the questions on my notes have been amazingly answered. So I guess I'll just say thank you for being on the show, Guangzhao. It's been fantastic having you.
Thank you for inviting me among all the big names. Right.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I certainly find myself like slightly a bit more confident about that.
Yeah. Well, I should emphasize for listeners, although it's mostly been very brainy people like Guangzhao and very top of their game people like Nikki Harman that have been on the show, anyone can be on. I'm planning to have my dad on at some point, and he's only read a couple books from China, but it doesn't have to be an expert show because I'm not an expert. A lot of the things I've learned have been via the podcast, talking to people like yourself. So yeah, if anyone has thought about being on but is afraid, don't be. That said, though, we have some awesome potential guests lined up for the rest of this sci-fi season. I won't make any promises just in case there's cancellations, but the plan is to get some authors. That's all I'll say for now.
That would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Really to who came after me.
Yeah, we shall see. I'm going to keep it a surprise. But have a great evening, Guangzhao. It's been fab having you on.
Have a lovely weekend.
Right, so another thank you to Guangzhao for coming on the show. What a fantastic guest he was. I'm sure you'll all agree. Don't forget to go look up the London Book Club and show up to their events if you live in London. If you don't, it's still a great resource. You can get write-ups online, like we were saying, mostly in Chinese, but the Twitter is a valuable source of info, so is their mailing list. It's interesting stuff. Good way to keep abreast of Chinese sci-fi in translation. The other plugs, of course, are all for myself, so keep tuned to the podcast for more sci-fi series episodes. If all goes according to plan, honestly, we've got very cool stuff, very cool content, very cool guests lined up. Support the show. Of course, you can contribute via the Patreon and the Buy Me a Coffee. There's all sorts of fun bonus content you get access to via the Patreon. Other ways to support the show, social media. Give us a follow on Instagram @Trichific. Twitter, you can follow me. I tweet mostly about the podcast, not exclusively, at Angus Likes Words. Those are great places to reach out to me and give me some feedback or questions. If you want them read on the show, I will do so. Another fellow reached out to me on Instagram. Let me just find the account. There is a very good Chinese sci-fi account on Instagram. I'm stalling whilst I get it open. Beep, 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 boop, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep. Where is it? Trishific. Right, so the Chinese sci-fi Instagram account that you should follow is at Sino Sci-fi, S-I-N-O Sci-fi, no hyphen in sci-fi. It's about Chinese sci-fi, mostly in film and other Chinese films, but there is a little touching on literature as well. It's run by Linus Fredrickson, also known, I guess, by a Chinese name, Linus Lin Lu. Lin like forest, Lu like road. He seems to be a very knowledgeable and sound chap, and probably worth reaching out to or following if Chinese sci-fi is your cup of tea. So yeah, the other way to support the show, of course, is tell your dog, tell your robot waiter, tell the guy that cleans up your trash, because we are all members of this class system. Society. 再见.